Welcome to the Texas Goat Radio Show. I'm your host, Matorius. This is part 3 of the Owen Benjamin Dr. Shiva live stream number 1717. And they do use harsh language, just a warning out the gate.
Well, it's not a place you want to be. Like, they'll build up Booby, and then they'll use him as a martyr. It's a very dangerous place to be, that world. Like, they killed, they killed King and all these guys. Like, they'll build him up and then literally be like, they'll do the math and be like, wow, is it worth it if we just, like, shoot him in the head now? Like, they hate each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other dynamic I think people need to recognize is that people say, wait a minute, why did Kennedy get shot? Why did Martin Luther King get shot? Well, they are tools that are used, and among the elites, it's no different than you watch The Godfather, Godfather 1. There's a bunch of thugs, and they hate each other, right? They have their own disputes at their level. It's not like they're one. The swarm itself, sometimes it wants to go this way, sometimes it wants to go.
Yeah, I think at a certain level, and it's by design, the way they raise their children, the way they interact with each other, I think there's, and this is all obviously just my opinion, I think there's very little humanity left in the upper class. For the simple fact that if there was, then they wouldn't be what they are.
See those birds, right?
Yeah.
And one frog wants to go this way. If he gets the influence, then he'll go that way, right? So swarm movement is really interesting to understand because you realize that it's not any one point.
And I think if you in the United States, especially in the United States, where anybody can become wealthy at a certain point just by hard work, determination, right place, right time, offering the right service. But if you have no connections with anybody in the upper class elite, 1%, and that does happen to you and you become super wealthy, I do believe that a certain group of people come to you and they say, hey, these are the guidelines and you have to live by these guidelines. You can do whatever you want to within this pendulum swinging, but don't step outside of these guidelines or it will be dealt with. And that's one of the reasons why I think the big banks, they actually have wealth counselors to teach people and train people how to be wealthy that just become wealthy.
And people say, the Jews, or the Rothschild, or it's the reptile people like this guy David Icke. It's not that. That's a really misleader. Yeah. They're a much more decentralized, multiracial swarm. And I think once people understand that, then you realize what the role of Booby Kennedy is. He's a guy that they see as a very useful tool.
I finally saw a clip of Kennedy. I do believe I know who they're talking about. And he does have a strangish voice. Nothing too out of the normal for an older person. He seems kind of shaky.
As he can be used, he's got the Kennedy bullshit rapist aura, right? So they love rape and aura, so they have that with him. And then they recognize that they brainwashed successfully. They have a legacy of they have an operating system of brainwashing around the Kennedys, the Kennedy operating system that they can use to bring all these people together. And I believe women, Owen, we had our meeting this morning, and I said, it is women, our warrior scholars in our movement, who need to really expose Kennedy. I mean, if you are a true woman and you care about women's rights, you will fucking expose this bastard.
If you are a true woman, then you will expose him. Wouldn't that be something that Owen would talk about? I think he has preached against that. The whole, what would he say? The true Irishman something? Like, you're not a true Irishman if you don't do this. I've heard him straight up denounce verbiage like that. But then again, I've heard him straight up denounce his own personal techniques of public speaking and persuasion, wizardry.
Okay? Because he hates women at a very deep level. And women need to recognize that the Kennedys hate women.
Yeah.
At a very fundamental level.
Dude, it's a fucked up family. Like, if you look at Ethel and all these guys, it's like, they're, I mean, I don't believe in cursed bloodlines, but it's the closest argument to a cursed bloodline I've ever seen.
Well, I think they created their reality.
I think there is something to a cursed bloodline, but that there was a dynamic that changed on the day of Pentecost whenever the Holy Spirit was given to the children of God. And so there was a whole lot of things that changed. We live in a different time now compared to then because we didn't have access to the Holy Spirit the way we do now, in my opinion.
Right?
Yeah.
They create the reality. I mean, I think still to this day, someone should correct me. A friend of mine was telling me this, that every bottle of whiskey or scotch that comes in, there's still a cha-ching to the Kennedys, okay?
Yeah.
So they have profited from alcohol. They've profited from vaccines. And I think we need to understand that. And if you look at 1960...
And there's something true to that. There's, what do they call them? Blue laws? Something close to that. And it's laws, the way I remember it, the way I understand it, is there's laws that are in place so that people, you have to have some kind of family connection to being able to sell alcohol at a certain level. If you don't have any family connection, like grandfathered in or whatever their word is, then you can only have one store. You have to have some kind of connection in order to have multiple stores. I looked into that a few years ago, and that's how I remember that. And so there's definitely some kind of cult club whenever it comes to certain aspects.
Was the Kennedy Vaccination Act. John Kennedy passed that act. Here's a guy who was completely reckless, who got us into multiple wars under this aegis of fighting communism, almost blew up the whole fucking world. You know, Seymour Hersh talks about how this guy was completely reckless in everything he did. He never wrote any of his books. They always had ghostwriters, right? These guys aren't really creative people.
Yeah, he's a drug addict too. Like, I get that there's all kinds of medicines in the world. Like, I'm trying not to be a judgy guy. But, you know, like plant-based herbal stuff could be called a drug. Yeah. But I don't feel comfortable around people doing a lot of meth and shit like that. Like, they really are incredibly unstable people. Like John F. Kennedy.
He just said, I'm not comfortable being around somebody that does a lot of meth. That is such a bizarre statement. Nobody's comfortable being around somebody that's doing a lot of meth besides people that are doing a lot of meth. That to me is a bizarre statement.
You can see him kind of grinding his teeth at certain points. Like, that guy was on a shitload of drugs, and that's a bad place to be mentally, you know?
Well, one of the ways that John Kennedy even became his first race for Congress right here in Boston, I may get the name wrong, but his father, Joe Kennedy, who was really the godfather of all of this, wanted his son to win. And I think he was running against a guy called Taylor. So what he did was he went and found another guy called Taylor to run.
Yeah. I heard about that.
So my point is that everything they do, I mean, that's serious engineering, right? You have to figure out something, you have to execute it. So I think we need to recognize the reason it's very, very important to expose Booby Kennedy, because Booby Kennedys are a marked guy to confuse the masses. And they would get away with it if our movement didn't exist. And now...
I think that's a form of lowering, I hate using words like this, but using the same verbiage, lowering the vibrations of the listeners or whatever, it numbs you down. I can feel my brain shutting down every time he says the words Booby Kennedy. And so, because that's not how people talk. That's not how grown people talk to each other in mainly professional settings. You're not going to walk into a business meeting and start calling people names and whatnot. Normally. I don't know.
We're exposing the fuck out of him, which is awesome, right? If we don't do that, we're not doing our noble duty. Because the goal of Booby Kennedy is to gloss over everything. And notice his slogan, heal the divide. This is his liberal imperialist slogan. No, there's a fucking divide. It is us versus them. There is an us, which is the 8 billion people, and you fucking guys. And they want to gloss that over. This is classical liberal.
There is a division, and there needs to be a division, because not everybody agrees with everything. And there are people that are our enemy for the simple fact that they want to destroy us. They want us weak, dumb, and visionless. A man without a vision will perish. And although we don't fight against flesh and blood, but the entities that are at work, it's ridiculous to think that you don't need some barriers and boundaries.
Oh, we shall overcome. It should be we shall overthrow, right? So it should be we shall. They always come up with these little songs, peace, love, and understanding, right? So they can cover the real contradictions, right? And then if you say, hey, you sound very violent, Owen, I don't like the way you're talking. Well, shut the fuck up. And they get violent against you when you actually want to bring up the fact, no, there are fucking contradictions. I don't have a gold-plated toilet. I don't have a fucking compound. I don't get to spit in policeman's face like Kennedy did and get away with it. You do. I would get arrested. You don't. You see, it is us versus them. So they want to come up with these very nice slogans. They have a PR team working on this day in and day out. But they've never expected, Owen, that we would start exposing them. This is like a loose screw that they didn't count on.
And I love that you're exposing the behavior, because the swarm...
That doesn't make any sense. People have been exposing... First of all, there's nothing new under the sun. And when you understand that, humility is not far away. It sounds like Dr. Shiva and Owen have that same thing in common, as though they are the creator of something. They started this. They didn't start any of this. That's one of the reasons why we can't get anything done. And I say we, the people like us, the quote unquote truthers, is because most people like Owen and Dr. Shiva, they want to be the catalyst that sets something off, not set something off terrible, but have a movement, a joining together of the masses. And they want to be accredited for that. And that's not the case. Once people that do have a following stop looking for that glory, then something can happen.
You can take out a Bill Gates or any of them. They don't even care. They'll just replace it with the next. There's like 1,000 billionaires ready to be the next one. There's like a line of them. That's why it's the behavior. Like, don't fall for their idols. Don't fall for their traps. Like, verbally call them out, mock them. They aren't your heroes. And then you have to start building alternatives from the ground up, even if it's very.
Then there's a way of doing things respectfully. And I know a lot of people, there's some people that have a hard time respecting people that, in their eyes, they don't deserve respect. But everybody deserves at least some kind of respect. And so it's way easier to get things done whenever there's at least a hint of respect.
Example, even little wins, like my farm stand.
Yeah, it's awesome. And what they don't want people to do, Owen, they do not want people to become leaders in their own communities. And they do not want people to question specifically the not-so-obvious establishment. So if you look at the Kennedys, 1962 is when they created the Kennedy Vaccination Act, based on a very old science of the immune system. 1986, the next Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, protects all the big pharma guys. They passed the National Vaccine Injury Program. He was a sponsor on the Senate side of that bill. So the Kennedys made money making vaccines, right? And then for how many ever years from 1960 and people were getting injured, then they try to make themselves look good. And so they're saving those people when they actually indemnified all the big pharma companies. And then you have fucking Booby come along, who they created out of nowhere. Here's a guy who's a fucking heroin addict, was going to be sent away. Then suddenly they made him the head of a nonprofit called Waterkeepers. I believe a woman was running it, and then they brought him in. Right? This is sort of what they do.
And this is an opinion that's not a popular opinion at all. Nonprofits, I don't think there should be any nonprofits. I think. Okay, I'm not. I'm not going to go there.
That a pharma consultant is the one who gave Kennedy's talking points to suddenly start talking about thimerosal, right, in vaccines. But Kennedy's fundamental goal is not to eliminate the 1962 Vaccination Act, which is government getting into people's lives. Right? He talks about, big pharma, did this to, the vaccine injury. Well, your fucking uncle's the one who passed that. Are you going to mention that? No, you won't mention that. So what he wants, Owen, is when I put that, if you go look at that thread in that video, there's a guy called the Chief Nerd, and we need to go after this fool. He's like a Kennedy shill. I don't know how he's being paid, but he sucks up to Kennedy all day long. So I did an 8-threaded tweet showing, look, here's Kennedy's video. He says, I am pro-vaccine. I am emphatically pro-vaccine. I vaccinated all 69, probably 69 kids. Sorry, I vaccinated all 69 children with 69 vaccines, right? And I am for full vaccination of all Americans. And then he proceeds, and I have the full video, but that was the most compelling piece, to rail against the CDC, how horrible they are, corrupt they are. That's his shtick, right? And he goes, but I'm going to get them.
This sounds a whole lot like the practices of mass media. Large, there's a word for it. I can't think of it. Anyways, the big newspaper, I think in New York, the New Yorker or whatever, there was a story. There was a picture, not really a story per se, but there was a picture of the same day, same newspaper having two different opinions on the front page, depending on the geographical location of where they were presenting the newspaper. And so they were just covering both bases. And that sounds exactly what they're doing.
Make safe vaccines. What the fuck are you talking about? You're going to get a mob who fucking created this shit to make sense. You see? And all these people, Bobby's fighting for us. Are you fucking serious? So what we're dealing with now is the not-so-obvious establishment taking advantage of the stupidity of people who are enamored by the Kennedy name. That's all the bankroll that they have. So it's really, really...
Yeah, that they're victims. They use victim consciousness all the time. That's why I always hammer that. Is that's why, they're using his voice like he's a victim. And that's why I keep saying, I think it's from throat chlamydia. Like that guy, he had a competition, a public competition with his cousin of who could go down on more women. And now he can't talk. I'm like... there's something. I don't think he's a victim of the flu vaccine. Like, this is so fucking stupid.
Right.
And this is one of the things that sucks. Whenever you hear a story like that coming from Owen, I now know that there's probably very little truth to that. And the reason why I say that, the most obvious, right? Because you can go down the rabbit hole of Owen and realize that he is a lying, manipulative, wizardry type guy that just genuinely doesn't have anything positive to say unless he is manipulating somebody. But his Ari Shaffir, I don't want to call it a bit because he wasn't trying to be funny. He says something and he says, this is literally what he says, A plus B plus C. And then he says, I've got a video to prove it. And then he plays the Ari Shaffir video, and it's nothing. The content is about the same thing, but he doesn't say what he said he literally says in that video.
Even though I know he's a scumbag of the, I don't know, the highest order, is when I started exposing him in 2020, I had all these followers, all these rich bitch moms who injured their kids, right? Not the working class moms who give Kennedy money. They want to suck him off. Okay, they do. And they probably want to be sucked off by him. So
why is there so much vulgarity with these guys? That I get it. I'm not a prude, all right? There's conversations that I have with my buddy, especially the guy that I talk about every once in a while, that it really isn't for anybody, right? But to be on a podcast where you're claiming to help people and you're spreading information that you think is valid information, to be so vulgar blows my mind.
These mothers were so, oh my God, we got Dr. Shiva, he's a scientist, he's protecting our kids. And then I looked at Kennedy like, wait a minute, he endorsed Hillary Clinton 3 times. He endorsed his nephews for vaccine mandates. Then I found this video, and when I exposed that, I lost 20% of the followers. But the reason I want to repeat that again is that those people that supported him at a very deep and fundamental level, they promote him as their savior. You see?
Yeah, he's like the Pope. Well, I do it as a joke here. Like, my thing is I go, pay your gay away, entropystream.live/app/Sean Benjamin Comedy. If you've been in a Miata, Subaru, if you've listened to Wham, you owe me money. And so I do it in a way where not only do people do it because it's funny, but you kind of see the trick of that, where the Kennedys do it for real. They're like, they'll take these guilt-ridden.
You're doing it for real. This is he's such a bizarre person. His pay the gay away. He mirrored that from the Catholic pay your sins away. And so it's literally a cookie cutter of that, except pay your gay away because it has to be some form of homosexuality with Owen. And then he's like, ha, it's just a joke. And then he just said, you can see the trickery in that. You say so many, I'll say it's stupid and mind-numbing things, literally mind-numbing things. And then you say, hey, pay your gay away. If you're not gay, if you pay it away. And so there's people that just listen and just do because they don't want to be. It's much like children coursing, oh, I dare you to do that. Oh, you're not going to do that? Oh, chicken. You call them a chicken, and then they do it because, oh, don't call me a chicken. I'm not a chicken. Manipulation.
Women that are like, okay, I gave my kid a vaccine and now he's retarded, so here's my money. And then Pope Booby, absolves them of their sin, and then he's like, he gets them on their knees and they suck him off, and that's the holy water. And then they go. It's such a it would be funny if it wasn't so fucking dark. Where it's like he figured out how to capitalize on shame and guilt because he never goes at that 1962 act that you're talking about. Like, he could end that if he wanted to, but he never will.
No, he won't, because ultimately what
he just described his whole pay the gay away grift.
Kennedy's saying is that yes, we got government involved in your fucking bodies, into your bloodstream. My uncle kept government in your bodies because what they should have done is 1986. They should have removed the 1962 Act. But they had created the 1962 Act created the CDC, all these bureaucracies. It gave rise to Fauci. And then 86 protected Fauci and all these people. And it created another agency. So they created a Band-Aid on top of another Band-Aid. And fucking douchebag, okay? The devil himself wants to now create safe vaccines. That's what the fuck he wants to do. And he's got Malone and all these idiots who are part of a nonprofit. His own lawyer, when he came to Boston, we ran the vaccine safety immune health conference. He pulled me aside, Aaron Siri, another scumbag. He said, oh, Shiva, you got cytosol. Why don't we use that to create safe vaccines? I go, what did you just say? And he goes, oh, don't tell, you didn't hear that. Don't tell my wife. So that's what the guys are doing. They're all afraid of their wives. Really,
they are, because they're all cheating. I did a tweet about that when I was like, you can always tell when a guy's a scumbag when they're completely dominated by their wives and they like think it's cute. Where they're like, yeah, my wife runs the show. I'm like, did she catch you fucking her sister? Like, because that's typical. Like, that's how they end up running the show. And it's not something for these men to brag about. Like, if Booby Kennedy couldn't keep Big Pharma out of his own house, how is he supposed to keep it out of the country, you know?
Oh, and he married that woman within 5 months of his wife hanging herself.
Yeah, and he was definitely banging her before. I mean, because people want to act like, oh, his ex-wife is so crazy. Women don't naturally hang themselves. Like, if she wasn't murdered, which is possible, we're talking about Kennedys here, then that means her life was so dark, dismal, depressing, crazy. I mean, she had 4 kids. That means that Booby ran a very, very dark home.
Yeah, and so when I exposed Kennedy, all these women, right? Because I wouldn't, whatever, they realized that the dick sucking wasn't going to be that good with Booby anymore, right? They 20% of them left, which was awesome. But then Booby literally wrote a blog post. I mean, he put a lot of time into this. I did 50 videos exposing his bullshit. 2020, Owen, alone. No one was there supporting this. But I did the principled stand because we had a lot of mothers who had given money to him. There were mothers who came up and they said how he had essentially put their hands up their skirts, okay?
Yeah, he's constantly groping women, apparently. Constantly.
Right. So when I exposed him, and it was relentless, dude, I went after him and he's like, who the fuck is this darky? I'm Kennedy. Who the fuck is this guy? How can he do this? So he writes a big blog post where he says that I'm a vaccine maker. Unfucking believable. It's like the worst thing you could do. And he says, I'm friends with Bill.
This might be a good time to remind everybody that's watching this. If you don't know, much like the guys that they're talking about, Owen has at least one person who has accused him of groping him. And there's a video on that. And it's titled something like, Owen Benjamin's essay victim comes forward. And it was right after I started doing videos on Owen Benjamin, and Owen Benjamin highlights pretty much led me on to that video and encouraged me to do a commentary of it. And so
Gates, and then he says, I'm friends with the Clintons. How does he come to this conclusion? Because my company Cytosolve did mathematical modeling on lupus for one of the business units, which came to us and wanted us to innovative unit at Pfizer because they really wanted us to model it, and then the whole business unit disappeared. Right? He says I'm working with the Clintons because the White House, I won a contest to automatically analyze email when I was at MIT for death threats. Okay? Then he said I'm working with Bill Gates because on our website we get a 10% discount when we buy Microsoft software if we buy more than 10 boxes. Okay? Unfucking believable, man. So we sue him. The guy runs everywhere, doesn't accept service. My own lawyer didn't do the service in a different way, who then later revealed to me that he's a Kennedy fan. So this is Boston, right, where the Kennedys are everywhere. So this is how the Kennedys survive, through smear campaigns, through blatant fucking lying.
Yeah, they always accuse.
that's a good example of geographical location does matter. There's a reason why Owen moved to North Idaho or wherever he is. I don't know why it's so difficult for me to remember. I'm pretty sure it's Idaho. Anyways, geographical location does matter. It really does. And that is a good point as to why geographical location does matter.
It's not rules for radical shit. It's like they always accuse you of what they are.
Exactly.
So that way when you say, no, you are, they're what they...
So is that why, Owen, that's a very important statement right there. You always accuse people of PDFs. So is that what that is? Because there's usually no basis for your commentary in that way, going in that direction of people. Because it's always people that you were friends with, people that you were almost close friends with, at least acquaintances where you've known them for a while.
They claim that you're just being petty.
But to everyone listening, please share this video because it's really important people understand that you have two real warriors here who are exposing these people. We have a growing movement that it is Booby fucking Kennedy, it is the Trumps, it is the fucker Carlson, it is the Joe fucking douchebag Rogans. These...
Why? There's got to be... I don't know. Here's my honest opinion. Does the language personally bother me? No, it doesn't. It depends on the situation. Years ago, my mentor, he was the pastor of the church that I was going to. And whenever I say years ago, this was 20 years ago or so. It was me and him in the kitchen of the church, and we were waiting on this older, from my understanding, extremely wealthy guy to show up, and he was donating a bunch of clothes. And so the guy shows up, and we're unloading the clothes. We hang out in the kitchen for a little bit to talk, and he's got this cigar hanging out of his mouth. He's one of those older guys. Wasn't lit, just something that he had in his mouth. And he would cuss. He cussed a lot. And so after the guy left, the pastor, he looked at me, he said, "Hey, did any of that language bother you?" I said, "No, not even a little bit." He said, "Well, some people, I can't remember exactly what he said or how he said it, but it was pretty much, some people just don't know any better." And yeah, but whenever you are a face for a message that needs to be heard, the least amount of words possible is good. The simplest way of saying it is good, and throwing as little barriers in front of that message as possible is good.
People are the ones who really need to be exposed because they could not exist without the billionaire class backing them. Rogan just signed a $200 million Spotify deal. If you look at his history, in 2014, he was promoting GMOs. He had this guy over and over again, a Monsanto shill, a professor, who's all about GMOs. I had just done 5 research papers, Owen, conclusively showing, I wish we could share, you guys could turn on the share, because I want to show you this one paper, where we showed that when you genetically manipulate something, that what it does to glutathione levels, the antioxidant levels. And people sent tons of emails. Rogan would put me on the other one side.
Yeah, that was one of the things that used to be at least well known in the truther, quote unquote, movement, is whenever you do genetically modify something, it significantly takes away the good stuff that it had. And that's pretty much what he just said.
I think pro-GMO guy. Then when the vax came, like you said, he was pro-vaccine, making fun of quote-unquote anti-vaxxers.
He was.
Right? And now he realizes, oops, I need to make new viewers. It's just money, man. It's just, where is his viewership? They've done the target market analysis.
That sounds exactly like Owen. He has these grifts for the last few years, and as soon as he runs out of his followers, his cult members run out of money or interest in giving him money, he changes his grift immediately. And you saw that with the clip with the I'm not gonna lie to you guys, somebody gave me gold, and that was whenever he was talking about switching up the Christian grift that he was doing. He don't want to run those people off. Anyway, this seems like a good place to stop. This is part 3 of the live stream 1717 with Owen Benjamin and Dr. Shiva. This is the Texas Go radio show. I'm your host, Matorius. As always, till next time.